Welcome to the open mic. Imagine sitting in your own living room, perhaps on just a totally unremarkable Tuesday evening.
Right, just a normal night at home.
Exactly. The TV's on, maybe you're just scrolling on your phone, and suddenly your mother walks into the room, but her posture is entirely wrong.
Like a physical shift that you notice immediately.
Yeah, she's trembling. Her eyes are wide with this kind of sheer icy terror that you've never seen before. And she is holding out her smartphone, and her hands are shaking so hard she can barely keep the thing steady.
Oh, wow.
She's pointing at the screen,
Right.
frantically trying to show you a picture she just took of a grotesque, demonic animal that she claims she literally just vomited up and burned.
Just a completely terrifying scenario to be thrust into.
It really is. So you take the phone from her shaking hands, you look at the screen, and it is completely blank. I mean, it's just a picture of an empty floor.
Yeah.
Today, we are staring directly into the terrifying abyss of what happens when a human mind doesn't just bend, but entirely shatters.
Yeah.
Replacing objective reality with just a high-definition nightmare.
Because the human brain is this incredibly robust reality rendering engine, right? But when that engine begins to misfire, it does so with absolute terrifying conviction.
Yeah, it really forces us to confront a profoundly uncomfortable truth, honestly, about how fragile our perception of the world actually is.
It does. It absolutely does.
Which brings us to the source material for today's deep dive. We are unpacking a single, incredibly raw, real-time primary document today.
Yeah, and it's a tough one to read.
It is. It's an anonymous first-hand account posted to a forum on Reddit by a really desperate daughter.
And we are bringing you along with us, the listener, to meticulously dissect this text.
Right. And I want to be clear, the mission here isn't to gawk at a family's tragedy. We are going to analyze the anatomy of a sudden psychological break.
Exactly.
We'll look at the specific timeline the daughter laid out, the highly peculiar nature of the delusions, and the profound collateral damage this inflicts on the family unit sitting right there in the blast radius.
And I think we need to establish a very clear perimeter right off the bat around what we are doing here.
Yeah, that's important.
We are treating this text as an anthropological and psychological artifact. We are not diagnosing a patient from afar.
Right. I mean, we don't have her medical history or her blood work or any neurological scans, obviously.
Exactly. Our objective is to rigorously analyze the exact symptoms and behaviors documented by the daughter. We want to explore the underlying biological and psychological mechanics that could drive a mind to this extreme state.
And we should add, we will be analyzing the behavioral phenomena entirely independent of any theological or political stance on the religious content itself.
Absolutely.
So to begin, okay, let's unpack this. We have to understand the baseline. Because before you can measure how far an earthquake has shifted a foundation, you need to know where the house was originally built.
Right, what was her normal?
Exactly. And the daughter is very deliberate in establishing who her mother was before this crisis. She notes that her mother has always been Catholic, has always believed in God, and attended church. I think she phrased it here and there.
That's a really important detail.
Yeah, because it means religion itself isn't an invasive species in her mind, right? It's native flora. But then the daughter provides this timeline.
And the timeline is where things get really concerning.
2 months ago, there is a sudden, sharp uptick. The mother starts attending church 3 to 4 times a week.
Right.
Then the timeline compresses violently. Just 3 weeks ago, the mother experiences a complete fracture, becoming, in the daughter's words, a completely different person.
The period between that 2-month mark and the 3-week mark is, well, it's the crucial window of insidious onset.
Insidious onset. What does that mean in this context?
Well, if a person with absolutely zero religious background suddenly begins preaching on street corners, the family recognizes the anomaly immediately, right?
For sure. It's a huge red flag.
Exactly. It triggers an immediate psychiatric intervention. But here, the pathology uses the camouflage of the familiar.
Oh, wow.
Going to church 3 or 4 times a week, it falls within the bell curve of socially acceptable devotion.
That makes total sense. I look at that 2-month window and I picture turning up the volume dial on a stereo.
Oh, that's a good way to look at it.
Right. The music playing is the exact same music she has listened to her entire life. It's her Catholic faith. But slowly, imperceptibly at first, the volume dial is creeping up.
Just a little louder each week.
Yeah, for weeks it's just a bit louder. Then 3 weeks ago, the dial is completely ripped off the console, the volume is blown out, heavily distorted, and just totally deafening.
Yes.
I have to wonder, though, is there an actual identifiable neurobiological line where devotion mutates into obsession? Or is it entirely subjective until the hallucinations start?
Well, we can actually point to specific neurological pathways when discussing hyperreligiosity.
Why, really?
Oh, yeah. The brain's temporal lobes, particularly the regions interacting with the limbic system.
That's the emotional processing center, right?
Exactly, yes. Those regions are deeply involved in profound spiritual or religious experiences. We see this acutely in conditions like temporal lobe epilepsy.
Okay, I think I've heard of that.
It's sometimes referred to as Geschwin's syndrome. In those cases, abnormal electrical activity in these regions produces overwhelming, obsessive religious fervor, and often hypergraphia, which is an intense compulsion to write or preach.
Wait, hold on. Are you saying the brain literally has a localized hardware center for religious belief? That faith is just electrical signals in the temporal lobe?
Well, it's more nuanced than reducing faith to just a single brain region. The temporal lobe doesn't invent theology out of thin air.
Okay, that makes sense.
But it does appear to heavily mediate the emotional weight and the personal significance we attach to grand cosmic concepts. So when that region becomes hyperactive, whether due to an emerging psychotic disorder, extreme stress, or a neurological anomaly, the individual begins to perceive deep, overwhelming significance in everyday events.
And they start attributing those mundane events to a divine or supernatural source.
Precisely. So during those 5 weeks where she was simply going to church more often, her brain might have already been flooding her consciousness with an artificial sense of profound cosmic urgency.
The water was boiling, but the family couldn't see the bubbles yet.
That's a perfect way to describe it.
And boiling water requires an immense amount of energy. I mean, the shift wasn't just ideological, it immediately devastated her physical body.
The physical toll is staggering in these cases.
Yeah, the daughter writes that her mother completely stopped eating and showering. She would wear the exact same clothes for days, seemingly entirely unaware of it.
What we are looking at there is the systematic dismantling of executive function.
Executive function.
Yes, mostly governed by the prefrontal cortex. That's the part of the brain that handles planning, self-care, social awareness, and basic hygiene. In her case, it is being fundamentally overridden.
I read this part of the post and I immediately thought of a smartphone.
Okay, how so?
Imagine you have a massive corrupted app running in the background, right? It is draining the battery so violently that the phone has to shut down basic operating systems just to keep the processor from melting.
Right, it goes into survival mode.
Yeah. The screen goes dark, it's burning hot to the touch, and you can't even open the text message app. Her brain is rendering these massive delusions, and it's essentially cannibalizing the energy required for basic human maintenance.
That analogy is spot on. The metabolic cost of severe psychosis is just staggering. But we have to look closer at the specific symptoms the daughter outlines next, particularly regarding sleep.
Oh, the sleep part was rough to read.
Very. The text explicitly states that the mother is sleeping only 1 to 4 hours a night due to extreme fear and paranoia.
Which is nothing.
Yeah.
That's basically not sleeping.
Exactly. And heartbreakingly, when she does manage to sleep, she wets the bed without realizing it.
See, this is where I want to push back a bit on the timeline of cause and effect here.
Okay, go ahead.
Is the lack of sleep just a symptom of her terrifying delusions? Or is their sleep deprivation actually the thing creating the monsters? I mean, anyone who pulls an all-nighter feels a bit unhinged.
Oh, sure.
If you do that for 3 weeks straight, wouldn't anyone start hallucinating?
It's a great question. The relationship between sleep deprivation and psychosis is a devastating bidirectional feedback loop.
So they feed into each other.
Exactly. And the neurobiology here is deeply fascinating, but also alarming. During deep, slow-wave sleep, the brain activates the glymphatic system.
The glymphatic system.
Yeah, you can think of this as the brain's power washing cycle. Cerebrospinal fluid literally flushes through the neural tissue.
Wow, like an actual physical wash.
Literally. It clears out metabolic waste products, neurotoxins, and proteins like beta amyloid that build up during waking hours.
So because she's only sleeping an hour a night, her brain is literally marinating in its own toxic waste because she isn't hitting that slow-wave sleep cycle.
Precisely. It never gets the chance to power wash. And the chemical consequences of that are profound. Severe sleep deprivation leads to dopamine supersensitivity.
Okay, and dopamine is?
Dopamine is a neurotransmitter heavily involved in reward, motivation, and crucially, in this case, salience.
Salience, that's a great word. How does that work?
Salience is basically how the brain decides what matters in your environment. A rustling bush might just be the wind, or it might be a predator. Dopamine helps you assign significance to that sensory input.
Right.
But in a state of sleep-deprived dopamine supersensitivity, the brain begins assigning massive life-or-death significance to neutral stimuli.
Oh, man. So the shadow in the corner is no longer just a shadow.
Exactly. It is a threat.
That perfectly explains the paranoia. Every single ambient noise in the house suddenly feels like a targeted attack to her.
And it forces her brain into a continuous state of hyperarousal. The sympathetic nervous system, the fight or flight response is just locked in the on position.
Which has to be exhausting.
Completely exhausting. And this actually brings us back to the enuresis, the bedwetting.
Right, which the daughter notes happens without the mother even realizing it. That just feels like such a severe regression for a grown woman.
It is. Enuresis in adults during a psychotic break is a critical indicator of severe autonomic nervous system dysregulation.
Really? Just from the brain being overloaded?
Yes. Bladder control is actually a highly complex cortical function. The brain has to actively send inhibitory signals to the bladder while you sleep to prevent it from emptying.
Oh, I didn't realize it was an active process while we sleep.
It is. So when the cortex is utterly exhausted from sleep deprivation and that constant hyperarousal, those inhibitory signals just fail.
Wow.
And the fact that she doesn't realize it points to a profound disconnect between her consciousness and her physical form.
Her mind is just somewhere else entirely.
Exactly. Her mind is so utterly consumed by the cosmic divine battle she believes she is fighting that the physical reality of her body has just been deemed irrelevant.
Which brings us to the collateral damage. Because as her physical reality breaks down, so does her perception of her most intimate support system.
That's usually the most painful part for the family.
The delusion just refuses to remain abstract.
Yeah.
It begins actively hunting her loved ones. The daughter writes that her mother became convinced her husband, the father, was a literal demon.
Yeah.
She claimed to see dark entities hovering above him, and then she turned on the daughter, claiming she was also a demon who wanted to harm the family.
The paranoia requires a local shape. Abstract fear is incredibly difficult for the brain to sustain over time. It wants a tangible target it can see and react to.
But why her family? I mean, this is the scariest part of the text for me. The monsters aren't hiding in the closet or lurking outside the windows. The monsters are wearing the faces of the people who love her most.
It's a horrific experience.
The very people trying to bring her a plate of food or coax her to sleep are the ones her brain is screaming at her to run away from.
To understand the terrifying mechanics of this, we have to look at how the brain processes facial recognition and emotional attachment.
Okay, lay it on me.
There is a specific region in the brain called the fusiform face area, or the FFA. Its entire job is to recognize faces.
So I look at you, my FFA fires, and I know who you are.
That's step one. But step two is crucial. The FFA then sends a signal to the amygdala, which we talked about earlier, as the emotional center of the brain.
Right.
The amygdala provides the emotional warmth, the feeling of familiarity and love you experience when you see your spouse or your child. In certain neurological conditions, most famously Capgras delusion, the connection between the facial recognition center and the emotional center is severed.
Oh, wow. So she recognizes the physical face, but she doesn't feel the love.
Exactly. The visual cortex says, this looks exactly like my husband. But the amygdala is silent, there is no warmth, and the brain is incredibly intolerant of cognitive dissonance.
It needs an explanation for why things feel wrong.
Yes. It has to explain why she feels absolutely nothing, or even fear for the man standing in front of her.
And because her current operating system is completely saturated in this hyper-religious terror, her brain's solution to that dissonance isn't, I'm having a neurological event.
Right.
Its solution is, this thing that looks like my husband is actually a demon.
The delusion provides a perfectly logical narrative framework for a terrifying internal sensory failure.
Wow.
And it is a devastatingly effective isolating mechanism. By turning her support system into demonic threats, her own mind effectively traps her in solitary confinement.
Because if your husband is a demon, you cannot seek comfort from him.
Exactly. You cannot let him take you to a hospital. Every attempt the family makes to help her only validates her delusion that the demons are trying to trap her.
But the daughter notes a deeply tragic twist here. The mother doesn't just stay in this demonic delusion permanently.
Right, the fluctuation.
Yeah. The daughter says she will rapidly snap out of it. She'll suddenly blink, stop screaming about demons, and seemingly be her normal self again, before inevitably falling back into the psychosis.
Those moments of lucidity are arguably the most agonizing aspect of the entire ordeal, both for the patient and the family.
I can't even fathom the emotional whiplash for the daughter. I mean, imagine you spend an hour trying to give your mother a glass of water while she cowers in the corner calling you a monster.
Just heartbreaking.
And then she blinks, her shoulders drop, and she looks at you with her normal eyes and says, "Honey, I'm so tired." The false hope that must inject into the room, you think the nightmare is over, only for her eyes to go wide again 10 minutes later.
Psychosis is rarely a steady state, especially in its acute onset phases. The neurotransmitter storms in the brain fluctuate.
So it's not a constant levels of chemicals.
No, not at all. We can theorize that during these brief periods where perhaps cortisol levels momentarily dip or a micro moment of restorative rest allows the prefrontal cortex to briefly assert control, the delusion fractures.
But it implies her core identity is still in there. She isn't entirely gone. She's trapped inside a failing machine, fighting against the narrative her own brain is spinning.
Yes. And because she is entirely alienated from her family by these demonic projections, she seeks validation and input from the only source left available to her, the internet.
Right, the digital fuel. The text notes that she spends hours every night on her phone, alone in the dark, researching random stuff, which the daughter notes is mostly religious.
Which is incredibly dangerous in that state of mind.
And then the linguistic mystery occurs. This part really got me.
Yeah, this is fascinating.
The daughter writes, in all caps, by the way, that when her mother wakes up from her brief moments of sleep, she wakes up terrified and speaking in either Hebrew or Latin. The daughter is adamant. She has never spoken these languages in her life before.
Right. And when an observer encounters a symptom like speaking in an unknown ancient language, the immediate instinct is often to leap to the supernatural.
Because it mirrors classical descriptions of demonic possession.
Exactly. It's straight out of a horror movie.
Well, let's play devil's advocate here. No pun intended. How do we explain this without jumping to those horror movie tropes? If she has never studied Latin, how on earth is she forming Latin sentences?
Well, the reality is she almost certainly isn't forming grammatically correct Latin sentences. We have to look at the intersection of her late-night digital habits and a phenomenon known as echolalia, layered with cryptomnesia.
Okay, let's define those for the listener. What are we talking about here?
Cryptomnesia occurs when a forgotten memory returns without being recognized as such by the subject, who believes it is a new and original thought.
Like accidentally plagiarizing a song you heard years ago.
Exactly. Now, echolalia is the unsolicited repetition of vocalizations made by another person. So consider her environment. She is awake at 3 a.m., experiencing terrifying paranoia, completely isolated from her family.
Right.
And she is scrolling through algorithmic feeds focused on intense religious content.
Oh, man. The algorithms on platforms like YouTube or TikTok, they are designed for maximum engagement. If you watch one video about spiritual warfare or demonic possession, the algorithm will aggressively feed you dozens more.
It is a relentless echo chamber.
It really is.
And what auditory content is heavily featured in videos about Catholic spiritual warfare or exorcisms?
Let me guess. Latin prayers.
Latin prayers, ancient liturgical chants. Her brain, which is highly vulnerable and desperate for a framework to understand its terror, is absorbing hours of this audio.
Okay, I see where this is going.
When she falls asleep for an hour and wakes up in a state of panic, her brain involuntarily regurgitates the phonetic patterns she was listening to just hours earlier.
But wait, the daughter specifically identifies it as Hebrew or Latin. If she's just babbling, how would the daughter know?
That's where we have to consider the observer's psychological state. The family is also terrified, right?
Yeah, they're living in a nightmare too. Yeah.
When the mother wakes up speaking in tongues, a phenomenon known as glossolalia, which is springing together phonemes that sound like language but lack actual semantic meaning, the terrified family's brains are also desperately pattern matching. If she strings together sounds that mimic the cadence of a Catholic mass she heard on YouTube, the family interprets the gibberish as Latin. The human brain is hardwired to find meaning in chaos.
Wow. So she isn't spontaneously speaking fluent Latin. She is essentially acting as a biological tape recorder, playing back the distorted audio of her own digital echo chamber.
Precisely.
But the specific choice of adopting these ancient languages, even just mimicking them, feels significant. I mean, why not just wake up screaming in English?
Because English is mundane. Adopting the auditory aesthetic of ancient holy languages elevates her internal struggle to a cosmic biblical scale.
It makes it feel as huge as her terror feels.
Yes. It justifies the sheer magnitude of the terror she is experiencing. If the threat is just a biological glitch, it's confusing. But if the threat is ancient demonic forces, then speaking ancient holy languages makes narrative sense.
Her brain is providing the production design for the horror movie it is forcing her to live in.
That is exactly what's happening.
And that production design quickly graduates from just auditory mimicking to full-scale visual and somatic hallucinations.
The escalation here is very rapid.
The list of grandiose delusions the daughter provides escalates so fast. The mother claims to be the Virgin Mary and is frantically hoping she isn't pregnant.
Right.
She starts consuming large amounts of holy water and holy salt. She claims she spoke to Jesus and saw him standing right in front of her, completely bloodied. She believes the devil is physically pounding on the walls of the house because he is angry with her.
We are seeing a profound duality here. The delusions are violently oscillating between extreme divine grandiosity, like being the Virgin Mary, and visceral, grotesque terror.
And the detail that forced me to stop reading and just stare at the wall is the blank photograph.
Yeah, that is a striking detail.
The daughter writes, "One thing that really sticks with me is that she claims she threw up some kind of animal and then burned it. She later showed us a picture of the thing, and there was literally nothing there. But to her, it was completely real."
The blank photograph is a chilling artifact of true psychosis. It is the ultimate proof of the unbridgeable chasm between objective reality and her subjective experience.
It's like she has a VR headset superglued to her face, right? And she's playing this terrifying survival horror game, but the family is just standing in the empty living room watching her swing at empty air.
That's a great analogy.
When she looks at that blank photo on her phone, what is her visual cortex actually doing? Is she just imagining it, or is she literally seeing a monster?
She is literally seeing it.
Wow.
In a true hallucination, the primary visual cortex fires with the exact same intensity and pattern as it would if an actual physical object were reflecting light into her retinas.
So to her, it's real.
Yes. To her brain, the monster on the screen is indistinguishable from the phone holding the screen. Her sensory processing centers are generating input from the top down, essentially overriding the bottom-up sensory data from her eyes.
But let's look at the somatic nature of these delusions. They are intensely physical.
Very much so.
She is terrified of a divine pregnancy. She is compulsively drinking salt and holy water. She believes she physically vomited an animal. Why is her brain translating this mental breakdown into such intense bodily phenomena?
Somatic delusions, which are delusions involving the physical body, are incredibly common in severe psychosis. This is because the mind and body are intrinsically linked via regions like the insular cortex, which processes internal bodily sensations.
Okay.
When a person is experiencing unimaginable psychological agony and terror, the brain often literalizes that pain.
Like a psychosomatic translation of trauma.
Exactly. Let's analyze the fear of pregnancy, for instance. Believing she is the Virgin Mary and feeling a divine pregnancy is a classic manifestation of the loss of bodily autonomy.
Because her mind feels completely out of her control, invaded by foreign, terrifying thoughts.
Right. Her brain translates that psychological invasion into a physical one. A profound fear that her physical body is being hijacked for a divine purpose.
That is so dark. And what about vomiting the animal?
Well, vomiting is a primal biological mechanism for purging toxins. Psychologically, she feels an overwhelming sense of internal corruption or sickness, the demons she believes are attacking her.
Right.
The vagus nerve, which tightly connects the gut to the brain's emotional centers, is highly responsive to extreme stress. Her brain takes the overwhelming nausea of her terror and constructs a narrative around it.
I am sick because there is a demonic animal inside me and I must expel it.
Exactly. The physical act of vomiting, combined with the visual hallucination of the animal, is her mind's desperate, literal attempt to purge the psychological horror.
It is utterly tragic. Because while she is locked in this massive, cosmic, biblical battle, vomiting demons and speaking to a bloody Jesus, her everyday cognitive functions, just the basic mechanics of being a human being in a room, are collapsing.
The cognitive load required to sustain these hallucinations is immense. It leaves virtually no processing power for basic reality testing or interpersonal communication.
And the daughter outlines this cognitive erosion beautifully. Alongside the general paranoia, the mother believing people are setting traps or trying to trick her, there's severe, catastrophic, short-term memory loss.
Yes, the memory issues are very prominent.
The mother cannot remember conversations from earlier in the day before, or even the entire week. The daughter notes that she's entirely unable to hold a conversation without getting profoundly frustrated and upset.
We have to look at the hippocampus here, which is the brain's primary center for memory consolidation.
Right, because my immediate thought reading the daughter's text is actually about trauma.
The childhood trauma she mentioned.
Yeah. The daughter explicitly states, I know she has a lot of unresolved trauma as a child that she isn't willing to talk about. I don't know if it's relevant or not. I'm not sure what could have triggered this.
Right.
When I read that, I wondered, is this childhood trauma bubbling up and overriding her memory, sort of like a dissociative fugue state? Or is her brain simply full?
The neurobiology strongly points to the latter. Under the kind of extreme prolonged stress and sleep deprivation she is experiencing, the body is flooded with cortisol.
The stress hormone.
Exactly. And the hippocampus is exquisitely sensitive to cortisol. Sustained high levels of cortisol literally impair the hippocampus's ability to encode new short-term memories.
So it's a physical block.
Yes. Her brain isn't just distracted, the mechanism that hits record on daily events is completely offline.
So when the family tries to talk to her, she gets frustrated because she literally cannot track the syntax of the conversation.
She can't hold on to the thread of what's being said.
It's like trying to run a brand new, highly demanding video game on a computer from 1995. You move the mouse, the processor spikes to 100%, the fan screams, and the whole system just freezes and crashes.
That's it exactly. The friction she feels during a conversation is the friction of a failing cognitive engine. But your point about the daughter mentioning unresolved childhood trauma is vital, not necessarily for diagnosing the mother, but for understanding the daughter's psychological state.
She is desperately hunting for logic in a completely illogical situation.
The human mind abhors a vacuum of meaning. There's a term, apophenia, which is the tendency to perceive meaningful connections between completely unrelated things.
We're trying to connect the dots even when there aren't any.
Exactly. When a loved one suddenly, and seemingly out of nowhere, completely loses their grip on reality, it is existentially terrifying for the observer. It implies that our own minds are equally fragile, that chaos can strike without warning.
If the brain can just break for no reason, then none of us are safe.
Precisely. So the daughter naturally reaches for the unresolved childhood trauma because it offers a narrative framework.
It gives her a reason.
It suggests causality. It says, this didn't just happen randomly out of the blue. It is a delayed reaction to a specific past event.
Right. It makes the horrifying what of the psychosis slightly more tolerable by assigning it a potential why.
Even if that why is entirely speculative, it acts as a psychological life raft for the family.
But the tragedy of this text is that the post ends with the ultimate realization that the life raft is deflating. After detailing the demons, the languages, the blank photos, and the memory loss, the daughter's final sentence is simply, I don't know how to help her.
It is the stark, brutal reality of severe psychiatric emergencies.
It really is.
Love, logic, patience, and family history are often rendered completely powerless in the face of acute psychosis. When the brain's reality testing functions have failed to this profound degree, professional, medical, and pharmacological intervention is the only viable path to halting the deterioration.
You cannot reason someone out of a belief that they did not reason themselves into.
Exactly. You just can't.
If we retrace the tragic arc we've just unpacked today, it is staggering how rapidly the architecture of a life can collapse.
It's breathtakingly fast.
We started with a baseline of Catholic faith, a seemingly innocuous, even comforting increase in church attendance. But beneath that camouflage, the neurochemistry was shifting.
The volume dial was turning up.
The timeline cascaded into severe physical neglect, the complete cessation of sleep, and the resulting biological toxicity that accelerated the delusions. Her mind warped the most intimate bonds of love into demonic threats, utilizing the fusiform gyrus to isolate her from the very people trying to save her.
It pushed everyone away.
It drove her to late-night digital echo chambers, where she absorbed and regurgitated the auditory aesthetics of ancient holy wars. And ultimately, it culminated in a total fracturing of reality, manifesting in visceral, somatic hallucinations, blank photos of vomited monsters, and the complete erosion of her short-term memory beneath a flood of cortisol.
And the family is left utterly devastated, trapped in a house that has essentially become haunted. But the ghosts are not supernatural. They are generated entirely by the malfunctioning neural pathways of the woman they love.
As we wrap up this deep dive, I want to ask you, the listener, to reflect on the absolute, terrifying fragility of the human mind. The boundary line separating a deeply held, comforting personal belief from a completely isolating, terrifying delusion is sometimes just a matter of millimeters in our neurochemistry.
It's a very thin line.
It requires a profound level of empathy to truly absorb a text like this. This Reddit post isn't just an internet spooky story to read in the dark. It is a raw, real-time cry for help from a daughter who is sitting on her living room couch, watching her mother disappear right in front of her, replaced by a terrified stranger who happens to share her face.
And I want to leave you with one final lingering thought to ponder long after you finish listening. We discussed the agonizing nature of the mother rapidly snapping out of it, and we talked about the false hope that gives the daughter.
Yeah, those brief moments of clarity.
But consider for a moment the unimaginable, suffocating horror of those brief moments of lucidity for the mother herself. What must it actually feel like to temporarily wake up inside a life you have actively, systematically dismantled?
Oh, God.
To blink and suddenly realize you are looking at the husband and daughter you just spent the last hour accusing of being literal demons. To feel the crushing, toxic exhaustion of weeks without sleep, to see the terror in your family's eyes, and to know with absolute terrifying clarity that your own mind is simply waiting for the opportunity to pull you back under the dark water at any moment.
The monster isn't hiding under the bed. The monster is the very lens you're being forced to look through.